think we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Guide to Canada workshop. And my name is Kendra Ford, and I'm an International Transition Coordinator at Conestoga College. And I understand that there are students from a wide variety of colleges here in Ontario. So welcome one and all from Conestoga and every other college here in Ontario. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Julie, to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Kendra. Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. My name is Julie, and just like Kendra, I'm one of the International Transition Coordinators at Conestoga College. Very happy to have you here with us today, and hopefully you will learn something new and useful so that you can incorporate it to your new and exciting 2022. Back to you, Kendra.
Thanks, Julie. So here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. So as a post-secondary student in Ontario, you're going to find that many of your classes, both the ones that are virtual or in person, will involve a lot of interactions and as facilitate with different people from different cultures. And as facilitators, our goal today is not just to speak to you, but to create a comfortable and interactive environment where you can participate and share your knowledge. So in this setting, we are going to focus on exploring cultural differences. We're going to cover some communication tips, and hopefully there will be some time at the end for Q&A and general discussion. So this is the ground that we're planning to cover today. And again, we want it to be as interactive as possible as we can for this type of format. So feel free to chime in the chat if you have questions or comments about what we're discussing, and we've created some opportunities for you to interact with us as well. So we have about 68 people, so I think there's enough time perhaps to do an icebreaker. We won't necessarily have time for everyone to participate, but I think for those of you who feel comfortable, we invite you to participate in this icebreaker, which is an activity that you will find in a lot of your the beginning of your classes or workshops that you attend as a student. The purpose of an icebreaker is to help people feel more comfortable and get to know each other. So in the chat, if you feel more comfortable, or you could comment using your audio, feel free to share your first name, whether or not you're inside or outside of Canada, and a fun or interesting fact about your hometown. So feel free to share this information in the chat. And I believe in our webinar, people can ask to have themselves unmuted and share via their mic if they feel more comfortable. So I'll allow Julie to, or pass it to Julie to unmute you if you'd like that. So, see some people from Nigeria, currently inside of Canada, someone in Singapore, and we have someone with their hand up.
I see that Brahim raised his hand. Feel free to talk.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Brahim Said. I am from Mauritania. I live currently in Morocco. And it's really a pleasure to join you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Brahim, did you want to share an interesting fact about your hometown?
We're living now in we're having a great season. We're in winter season, and it's really very nice and interesting to live here nowadays.
Cool. I wonder what winter in Morocco is like. It's probably pretty mild, I imagine. Not like here.
Yeah, of course.
Great. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Brahim. We really appreciate that.
Thank you a lot. Thanks.
We have another student who would like to share with us. So I will let you talk right now. Feel free to talk. So Panjana, hope that I said your name right.
Oh, yes, you did. Thank you so much. Hi, all. My name is Savanjana, but then you may call me Sob. And I am in Canada right now. I am from Niagara College, and it has been fun. I'm awaiting the snowfall. There have been flurries. I'm awaiting more snow. And a fun fact from my hometown. So I am from Orissa in India. That's northeastern part of India, and uh, so we have this beach festival there in Orissa where we pull chariots who are the there are idols who are seated in on the chariots, and then they are pulled across the streets, and it's a gala event that we have there in during summers and rain, so in between that time is when we celebrate that.
Oh, Kendra, you have meeting.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sorry, not always, but I do still sometimes forget to unmute myself. But thank you so much for sharing, Sub. We appreciate it. Anyone else have their hand up? Oh, I see someone from the Philippines said that their country is the Facebook capital of the world. So thank you for sharing that, Lester. I didn't know if there was a Facebook capital of the world, but I guess there must be. So that's cool to know. Thank you for sharing. Great. So I think in that case, we got a good sense of folks that are here and kind of what a typical icebreaker could look like in a class or workshop or meeting of sorts that you might participate. Icebreakers are pretty typical here in Canada for many different group-based activities. So it was nice to hear from you and get to know some of you. So thank you so much for participating. So I'm going to pass it off to Julie to kick off our first discussion.
Thank you, Kendra. So you know that the topic for today is about culture. So before we discuss culture in Canada, let's discuss the concept of culture first. So what does culture mean to you? What comes to your mind when you hear that word? Feel free to share it in the chat box. And if you would like to talk, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand as well. We do really want to get the conversation going. So, there is no right or no wrong answer. We just want to see the way you look at the word culture. Kendra, while we're waiting for people to maybe think a little bit about the word culture, if you got asked this question, how would you answer? What is culture to you?
Well, don't want to give it away, but I'm seeing a lot of good feedback in the chat. So I'll reflect on the chat, I'll defer to you. So I don't want to, take away from what people are saying. So I'll put it back on you too. We got some great responses in the chat.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you actually take a lot of, you actually have the answer very much quickly than I thought. So I love the share that people have here in the chat box. Culture to me is the way of life. Culture is people's way of life. Yes. Culture is information and behavior passed through a community. I think that this is also very correct. Tradition, festivals, yes, a very exciting part of culture. Food and drink as well. It's the way people do things, food, mannerism, history. And yes, Simajit, I also believe that culture means the reflection of belief as well. The tradition and the custom of particular place. Wow, we have a lot of beautiful answer here. And yes, just like I said at the beginning, there is really no wrong or right answer. It's the way you see and the way you feel from your own experience. Yes, so for the purpose of today, if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so as you know, from the chat box, we see that there are many different ways of defining culture. And for the purpose of our webinar today, we will focus on this version of culture, as you can see on the slide. So for us today, culture would be the ideas that people share about what is normal or expected. And so if we apply that to our context, like in our college environment or our workplace environment, we will see that culture here is bound with what is considered as normal, what is expected of us as a student or an employee. And one major aspect of success as the student or employee is to meeting the expectations of the faculty, of the employer, and of the colleagues, right? And the expectation and norms can really differ between the environments in Canada and in other countries. And those differences and the unspoken rules that can make it really hard for newcomers to integrate smoothly and effectively into Canadian college or workplace. But the good thing is, once you understand these norms and expectation, it can help you tremendously to help you with your academic success, with your abilities to make friends, to get along with your colleague, and better develop your career here in Canada. So now I think it's time for us to dive in more detail of this country difference. Kendra, would you like to start?
Yes. So now we're going to encourage folks to share a time when each of you noticed, oops, I noticed a typo, something different about culture in Canada compared to your own culture. Now, I understand that a lot of people are still abroad, and that's okay. But if you are here in Canada and you would like to share, or you've been here before, and you'd like to share an example of something you noticed that was different from what you're used to and what the expectations in your home culture versus Canada, now is a time to share that. We're inviting people to share that. So I have always lived in Canada my whole life, but I have had the experience of visiting family in Scotland because my mother's from Scotland. And one thing that I noticed different, and that was different, that actually resulted in some sort of like misunderstanding, was the fact that people don't, especially for when it comes to their elders, they don't really use pronouns to refer to people. So, for example, or they avoid it as much as possible and use their proper name when referring to people. So if someone said like, "Where's Auntie Sadie?" and if you said, "Oh, she's in the kitchen," that would be considered like maybe a little bit rude. You were supposed to say Auntie Sadie is in the kitchen and not just say her or she, referring to your aunt. So in Canada, in our the way we speak tends to be more informal, especially related to family members, for at least for people in like what we would consider like mainstream Canadian culture, because Canada is diverse. So that was like an experience I had where I had no intention of being impolite, but because I wasn't familiar with that custom, I came off as being very impolite, I was told. And I was lucky because given that they were family, they were okay, like being very direct with me and telling me that I did the wrong thing. In some situations, you might do the wrong thing or the thing that is not expected in a culture, and you don't have anyone there who's going to like directly tell you that. So I was very lucky in that situation. Does anyone else have an example that they want to share?
Felicitas, I see that you raised your hand. Feel free to talk.
Yeah, hello, good evening. My name is Felicitas from Nigeria.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. So one thing about like in Nigeria, though I'm not in Canada yet, but I have friends there, and they told me like culture shock that they had was working in a place and them being asked to address them with their name. In my own place in Nigeria, when we want to greet, we greet by kneeling down as a woman or like prostrating as a man. But my friends were like, when they got there, when they do that, they look strange. So, you have to stand and say, hello, hi. You can't do that in Nigeria. It will be termed rude. You have to address like what the first person just said. You have to address with, oh, my auntie. Anybody that is your senior is like your aunt. Anybody, if, for the men, is like your uncle. Even when sometimes you are not even related directly. So I think that's like a different culture, the difference between Canada and Nigeria. we attach too much respect to names and greeting and everything.
That's a great example. And I've noticed with a lot of students, especially from Nigeria, using ma'am or sir a lot is very common. And so I noticed that that's like showing those, sign of respect to say ma'am or sir is not generally like common unless I would say like you might say sir interacting with a police officer or something like that, but it's not very common to use the term sir or ma'am, even with like your manager or boss. Like it's a different and it's not that we don't value respect in those relationships. It's just that's not the particular way that it's typically we express respect using sir and ma'am. But it's something I noticed that a lot of Nigerian students do, and it's like it always seems like very very formal from my perspective, but I understand it's a norm. So that's always interesting to hear about. So not indicating age in a resume in Canada, we usually show our age in a resume in my country. So that's a great example. So I encourage everyone, if you have career services available to you at your college, I know for sure our students have those services available at Conestoga, always a great idea sooner than later to meet with a career advisor to have them review your resume and ensure that it meets the expectations of Canadian employers. So that's a great example.
Kendra, I see that Sapper would like to talk as well. So feel free to share with us your experience.
Hey, hi, how you doing?
Great, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
So pretty much it's more of an experience than an example. I moved here to Toronto last week, like last Saturday, okay? It's more of an experience. See, I am from Saudi Arabia, from Taif, Saudi Arabia. I'm a Muslim. So I am used to the fact, because in Saudi Arabia, it's custom to say, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. Whenever you enter a store, a house, or wherever, if you are arriving at a place, it's accustomed to say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. I found myself saying that a few times because it's a habit. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, so it's a habit. I went into Walmart the other day and I mistakenly said it, and then people were looking at me, and then I was like, "Oh my God, this really just happened." You know, it's a bit weird, but it's okay. I'm adjusting pretty well, I think.
Thank you for sharing that example. And it's a good example of how something that's considered normal and polite in the environment that you're used to is either confusing or not polite in a new environment. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing. I saw someone else, the small talk is here in the group chat, engaging in small talk and pleasantries, even with strangers, or every time you start a conversation with someone, hi, how are you? And like ask and always the answer must be like something simple, like fine. I've heard that is confusing for some students because they'll ask, how are you? But really, unless you have a very close relationship with the person, if you're having a bad day or something is going wrong in your life, usually it's not expected that you would actually get into that and talk about that when they ask you how you're doing. So it's kind of like a courtesy to ask how you are, but it's not necessarily a genuine invitation for you to share how you're actually doing, which is confusing even for people who are, from Canada and have only been in a Canadian environment their whole life. So that's something that people indicated here. Yeah. Julie, do you have anything to add to that, or have you seen any, is there anyone else with their hand up that I don't see?
Yes, that would be me, Terry. Thanks.
Awesome.
So I'm from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and one of the things I've noticed in terms of difference is the road traffic rules, basically, how persons interact. So back home, if someone is coming out from a road onto the main, we tend to either blow our horns to let them know. If someone was polite to you and let you out onto the main road, we tend to blow our horns as a way of saying thank you. or if you're trying to get someone's attention to tell them, go ahead, we flash our lights. But here, they don't blow horn much unless they're upset. So if you blow your horn, apparently that is considered rude. Or if you flash your lights during the while you're on the road. So that was a bit different for me.
That is a great example, right? So another one too, even just like driving on the different side of the road. I know students from Bermuda, it's a big adjustment. I don't know if St. Vincent is the same.
It's the same thing. We drive on the opposite side.
Yeah, and in some ways it can be a safety concern because you're looking you might take one step into the street while you're looking, like to see if it's safe, but you may look the wrong way because of what you're used to your whole life. So when I was in Scotland at one time, I almost got hit by a bus because I looked the wrong way when I was crossing the street. And I know that has been a safety concern with students from different parts of the Caribbean too. So yeah, it's good to notice the differences and to be very cautious because just, our habits are so ingrained, right? With respect to flashing lights, hopefully I'm not rude. Sometimes I flash my lights to let people know that it's okay for them to go. Sometimes some people do that. Julie, I don't know your experience or if maybe I'm just being rude, but sometimes if people are like hesitating to go and you're wanting to let them know it's okay, like a pedestrian, right? Because sometimes people don't always stop for pedestrians here, even though you're supposed to. I flash my lights to let them know that I'm committed to stopping. So even in Canada, if you've lived here your whole life, it can still be confusing sometimes, but that's a great observation. I think maybe we'll take one more example if someone has one before moving on to the next exercise.
Yeah, sure. So we have Paul who want to share with us as well. I'm really happy that we have a lot of people here today to share all the country differences from all around the world. Paul, feel free to go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Paul. I'm from Nigeria, but I moved to Australia in 2016. I did my master's in Australia. I worked for a while before I came to Canada. So I'm used to now two different cultures, Nigeria and Australia. The first thing I noticed here, when I moved to Australia, I think I had problem driving because they drive on the left side. So eventually I got used to it. Then when I came here, it's the same with Nigeria. They drive on the right side. So trying to get used to that again. Then secondly, I think compared to Nigeria here, the lifestyle in Nigeria, especially most African countries, is more like community-based. People interact more, make friends more. Like if you live in an area, virtually everybody that live around you, the same street or neighbor, or a house that's close to your house, most time after a period of time, you'll be like family members because you interact more. But I noticed, the first thing I noticed here, and it's the same in Australia, is that people tend to mind their business more and they don't greet much. Like in my country, people greet a lot. Even someone you don't know, if you pass the person, you say hi. Or if it's someone you think that is your senior, you greet the person in a more respectful way. So the same thing here in Australia, people tend to mind their business, stay on their own more, even when they live close by. It's expected they're supposed to live more like a community compared. So back in my country, people mix up a lot, people socialize more, people greet more, people mix up more compared to here. Then another thing is the food. The food here is more processed food. They eat a lot of processed food. Compared to my country, we eat natural food, more of natural food. It's not, you hardly see people eating processed food. So, yeah, we eat it as we harvest it like that. They prepare it fresh. But here, they process virtually everything. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Those are very apt observations. And another thing I've heard from Nigerian students too is that our food is so sweet. Everything has added sugar, and it's
exactly
like off-putting for some people. So yeah, great observations. They make a lot of sense. And also I noticed one other example here from the chat about family doctors. So I'm from Brazil, says Iago. We don't have a family doctor here. Everyone seems to have a family doctor. So yeah, here the ideal scenario is that everyone has a family doctor. The healthcare system is set up so that it works more effectively if you do have a family doctor, but there actually is kind of a shortage. Not everyone does have a family doctor, even though it's kind of set up so that you're supposed to. And in addition to family doctors, we also have a designation here of nurse practitioner who can provide primary care. So some people are confused about that because they're like, is a nurse the same as totally different from a doctor? Well, nurse practitioners can prescribe medications and diagnose a range of conditions. So a lot of people have a nurse practitioner as their primary healthcare provider here in Ontario. And people like to say, sorry, I see that. Yes, sorry is like one of the words people say a lot here. So I think you will find that, and saying doesn't hurt to say sorry sometimes. Like you may find being generous with that word helps you make a good impression in certain situations. We'll get into that more later. So thank you everyone for sharing your examples. I wish we had more time for everyone, but I think we should move on to our next activity to get through our content today. So now that we've touched on different examples of differences, we're going to explore, do an activity where we explore how we're going to explore this further and talk about how our own values relate to different situations in work or education. So we're going to present different ideas and perspectives, and then you are going to, with some of the poll questions that Julie will launch, you'll indicate how much you agree or disagree with the idea that we're presenting. And so we really want you to know that there are no wrong answers for this activity. And we invite you to share your honest perspective about what answer feels most right to you. So having said that, we're going to move to the first example. So concepts of time really vary across cultures. So we're asking you, being on time for work means arriving 10 minutes before the official or written start time. So being on time for work means arriving 10 minutes before the official start time. Do you strongly agree with that? Somewhat agree with that? Are you neutral? Do you somewhat disagree, or do you strongly disagree? A minute. All right, so we hear strongly agree for 60% of people, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. So thank you for sharing. Most people are saying they strongly agree or somewhat agree. So the reason why we present this is because we know that ideas of what constitutes on time are going to be different depending on the cultural context you come from. And we do note that in some cultures, perhaps particularly South Asia, time is often considered less important than relationships. So if you have a family member or friend who needs help with something, you would take the time to go and help them immediately, even if it means being a little bit late for an appointment with someone who is an acquaintance. And now this is a generalization, but this is something that's been observed in terms of cultural differences. So in Canada, it's generally expected that you be on time or slightly early for all appointments or meetings. You'll see if you have a doctor's appointment, often they'll tell you, come 15 minutes before your appointment time, and they'll give you an appointment time on top of that. So it's like there's a unofficial 15-minute, earlier appointment time. And so in my own experience in post-secondary settings, I've seen like this cultural difference play out when students are what a professor would consider to be late for class. So maybe 2 minutes or 5 minutes, even past the official start time, is considered late. But when they come in late, they will take time to like greet their peers and shake hands and say hello. And so this would be polite from the cultural context the students coming from, but the faculty are going to see it as disruptive or rude. So it's important to note that being on time means being generally a few minutes before the start time. And in that situation, you would not want, if you were going to arrive late by accident or things happen, you would want to show respect to your faculty by coming in quietly and quickly getting seated and not greeting your peers, because that would be considered disruptive. So that's just a good habit to have, is arriving early. And if you are going to be late, don't greet people, just try to quietly find your seat. So that's our first example. So thanks everyone for participating. And the next one is Julie.
Yes, thank you very much, Kendra. And now let's move on to the next one, which is a little bit kind of like controversial, about direct eye contact. So do you think that it's important to look people in the eyes when you are speaking to them? Would you strongly agree or somewhat agree, neutral, or maybe you strongly disagree? Feel free to let us know your thought. Okay, so I will set the result for everybody to see. So as you can see, 63% agree that it's important to look people in the eyes, and 20% somewhat agree with this statement, and 16% is kind of neutral, and only 2% think that somewhat they disagree with the fact that we should look people in the eyes when we are talking to them. So I understand that it's really differ based on the culture, right? In some culture, direct eye contact is considered maybe like rude, disrespectful, or maybe looking people directly into the eyes sometimes make people feel uncomfortable. But for most Canadians, direct eye contact while speaking with or listening to someone are seen as respectful. And avoiding eye contact with a person, sometimes it can potentially be seen as being deceitful. So, for example, if a parent suspect a child is lying about something, usually they would say like, look me in the eye and say that you didn't do that, right? So it's something kind of uncommon that, when you look people in the eye directly, it means, in a way, it kind of like perceived as you are being honest to them. So I understand that for some people coming from a different culture where eye contact is not encouraged, for example, like in my culture, if you look directly to people, to their eyes, sometimes it could really make people feel uncomfortable. But, now that we are here in Canada, and I think that making the adjustment in Canada could be a challenge, but it could also be very rewarding towards the end as well, to make people feel that you are respectful to them. And as they say, practice makes perfect. So yeah, feel free to keep on practicing, working with people, communicating with people, so that you feel more comfortable having the direct eye contact. Over to you for the next question, Kendra.
Thanks, Julie. All right, so you can expect your coworkers to help you or offer advice whenever you need help. Do you strongly agree, somewhat agree? Are you neutral on this? Do you somewhat disagree, or do you strongly disagree? You can expect your coworkers to help you or offer advice whenever you need help. All right, so we have a distribution here of 30% strongly agree, 44% somewhat agree. There's 15% who are neutral. There's 5% or 5 of you who somewhat disagree, and 1 person strongly disagrees. So there's a pretty good distribution, but also more people agree than disagree in this example. So a sign of a good workplace is that coworkers are willing to help each other out. However, in Canada, we're a somewhat more individualistic society, which means that ultimately each person is responsible for their own work. So in Canadian and North American workplaces, there is less mentorship than in places, for example, like China, where mentorship relationships are commonplace in workplaces. For example, it's been noted that in some African countries, mentorship of newer or younger workers is considered a shared responsibility. And in Canada, it's your supervisor who is generally seen as the person responsible for training you. And your job is to follow the training and occasionally go to your supervisor if you're not sure about something. So basically, to sum that up, collaboration is common in workplaces, but ultimately everyone is supposed to be responsible for their own work. So thanks everyone for participating in the poll, and we'll move on to the next one.
Yes. So for the next ones, I think that it could be a bit, we have a distribution here, maybe in this one as well. So for this, we would like to ask for your opinions. If you think that it's more important to get along with people and have harmony, or to discuss and deal with conflict directly. Do you agree with this statement, or do you disagree? Or you are somewhat in between? Normally, if we are on a Zoom meeting, then we can do the annotation to see where everybody is in the spectrum. For today, now we will just use the Likert scale with, with 5 level. So feel free to, put your opinion there so that we can see where you stay. We will just wait a little bit more for people to input their answer. Okay, let me share the result with you. As you can see here, we have a wide distribution throughout the board. So the highest percent is 25% leaning towards dealing with conflicts directly, while for the very first 3 options, we have 21% in each of them. So 21% of you think that it's best to maintain harmony, and of opinion here. I would say that broadly speaking, because this is cultural, but also it depends on the person, on the individuals as well, right? But broadly speaking, many Eastern cultures emphasize on harmony over direct communication, and many Western societies emphasize on direct communication. I would say in Canada, it can be a fine line between both. It really depends on the situation. However, generally, it's best to deal with conflict directly. However, we do need to notice the tone. Sometimes people say that, when you disagree with someone, it's not really matter what you say, but more about how you say it. So it's really important for you to notice the tone, to have the appropriate tone for that. Sometimes the content is the same, but the tone really makes all the difference. And if we could pay attention to an appropriate tone and the way we phrase it, we could really help to avoid being seen as trying to offend others, so that people can see that this is a constructive criticism. Over to you, Kendra, for the next one.
Thanks, Julie. Hopefully my slides will cooperate. Oh, there we go. So it is okay to take calls from family and friends when you are at work or in class. It is okay to take calls from family and friends when you are at work or in class. Do you strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree? Okay, strongly agree, somewhat agree. We have some people in those categories, 4% strongly agree, 6% somewhat agree, a few people who are neutral, And then the majority are somewhat disagree or strongly disagree. Thank you for sharing. So there's a good distribution there. So personal calls and emails in the Canadian context at work or in class really should be taken on breaks or personal time. So taking calls in class is considered disruptive and can damage the relationship you have with your professor. And taking calls at work can result in consequences such as termination, depends on the workplace, because every workplace is a bit different. So even if you see other people doing it, it's generally not a good idea to take calls in the workplace or in class. So that's just something to be aware of. Great, thanks for sharing. And go to the next one.
Yes, so for the next one, we want to ask for your opinion about help with the other student. So if another fellow student needs help with their assignment, do you think that you should help them? Okay, so as we see here on the screen, about 37% believe that we should help. 32% strongly believe that we should help. About 20% are neutral, and 13% of you think that we should strongly disagree with this statement. So I understand that it is an honorable thing to want to help other people, right? And also sometimes it's really hard for you to say no as well. But be careful about how much help that you want to offer in the academic setting, because all students at Ontario College are expected to do their own work, submit original assignments, and cite information and ideas and source correctly. I understand that sometimes the concept of plagiarism is quite foreign to many students, especially in a place where we don't really have to write a lot of assignment. So like the education system could be differently. However, in your orientation, as you start your journey at your college, you will most likely hear about academic integrity. So submitting someone else's work or not citing external source properly in your assignments are academic integrity violations. The majority of assignment will be submitted electronically and will automatically be scanned with software that detect academic integration violation. So this could have serious consequences and can result in students being withdrawn from their school, from their program, and that could really affect your status as a student here in Canada. So, given all of these information is really good for you to, wanting to help, but you should know to what extent you would help. But thank you so much for all the sharing. I love that we see that many different opinion here, and it's great that we have here so that we can discuss this together, right? And
Absolutely.
Kendra.
Yes, so another one. The key
Yes.
to academic success is memorizing information so you can get high marks on exams. The key to academic success is memorizing information so you can get high marks on exams. Do you strongly agree, somewhat agree? Are you neutral? Do you disagree, or strongly disagree? All right, thanks everyone for sharing. We see strongly agree, a few people, somewhat agree, neutral, and then the majority are somewhat disagree or strongly disagree. So in many education systems around the world, academic achievement is generally assessed through tests and exams, which often require a lot of memorization of technical information. But one thing you should know about Ontario, in the Ontario college system, is most students will have some test or assignments, but there is a much greater emphasis on collaborative projects, on creative thinking, and of applying new concepts and problem solving. So you're going to find that a lot of assignments are going to require those things, and some assignments may require you to share your opinions and ideas. So you'll need to be prepared to show your knowledge of the course content in a variety of ways, with a strong emphasis on practical application, not just memorizing technical information. So that's something to keep in mind, is that the strategies that helped you be successful as a student in the past might need to be adjusted or retooled to help you be successful in the Ontario college setting. So thanks again for participating in that. We really appreciate your participation. So Julie is going to sum up the different items that we spoke about.
Yes, we're really happy to have Honor sharing today together with us. So let me just summarize it real quick about what we have discussed about the cultural continuum here. So the first part, it is expected that you are being on time by coming at least a few minutes early. This really helps you to get prepared and have some time to greet, to talk with the other, catch up with each other prior to the class or the work as well. Eye contact and a friendly greeting are generally expected when you see other people, such as, the professor, the classmate. So try to have a direct eye contact with people to show your respect to them. Also, it is normal for co-workers and for students to collaborate together, but everyone is responsible for completing their own work. And it's really up to you to decide how much, to what extent that you're willing to provide help. And also, it's not okay to take personal calls in class or at work. And academic success is not just about doing well on the exam, because you will need to apply the concepts, to use the knowledge that you have to solve the problem, and to think creatively outside the box as well. So those are the summary that we have for this activities that we just have. So now moving on, let's Kendra talk a bit about the email etiquette.
Great. So given that most of you are going to have a combination of in-person courses, but also there's, even with your in-person courses, there's going to be a large component of online communication for all your classes, most likely. And chances are most of the communication you'll have with your faculty directly, even if you are taking in-person classes, will be over email. So here's a few etiquette tips. So make sure you try to respond to emails promptly, and make sure you read course outlines and guides before asking questions. So faculty generally do not appreciate it if you ask very basic questions that they've already explained in detail in the course outline. They want you to read that first and do your part to understand things before going them and asking them questions like, when is this assignment due, for example. Furthermore, you should really think before including additional people in an email. So sometimes we see students feel like they're going to have a better outcome if they add a bunch of different departments and people on the same email. Generally, we don't recommend that, and just be very cautious about how many different people you add into an email, especially if you had an ongoing communication, you add a new person in. Some people may not appreciate that. So always include a greeting and address the recipient by name in an email. And if the topic is sensitive, or if you're struggling with wording, request a conversation or a Zoom meeting or something like that, where you're going to have a better time communicating. Also, in emails, and I would also suggest this for in-person communications, try to avoid speaking negatively about other people. And over email, try to be patient and recognize that responses are going to take up to 2 business days. Normally, that's a turnaround time for a lot of different emails. So those are a few tips for email etiquette in the Canadian college context. So here are some general tips too for just making good impressions at school or work. So even before COVID-19, there has been a note that in Canadian society, generally people like a good amount of personal space. So even before we had the pandemic, a good amount of personal space between you and acquaintances was always a good idea. But now, especially, try wherever possible to maintain 2 meters of distance, and this will help people around you feel more comfortable. And as we noted in our earlier discussion, small talk between students and coworkers is normal, but avoid asking questions that might be personal. For example, age, religion, and relationship status are not typical topics for small talk with acquaintances. Always ask questions if you don't understand something. Sometimes, even, for example, in people who've always lived in Canada may be reluctant to ask questions sometimes if they're feeling shy or not comfortable in a situation. But we encourage everyone to always ask questions if they don't understand something sooner than later, to help avoid, making a problem worse or creating misunderstanding. And it's always recommended that you admit to someone when you make a mistake, or apologize if your mistake affects someone else. This is going to help you maintain a good relationship with your colleagues and your fellow students and your faculty. With group assignments, we suggest that you always follow through on your commitments and communicate regularly with group members. One thing that a lot of students have noted, especially in the Ontario college setting, is that there's a lot of group work. And so your success in certain assignments will hinge on the collaboration and relationships you have with your peers. And so other people will be counting on you to do your part in group assignments. And so it's really important to always follow through on those commitments, because who knows, the people that you work with in group assignments might be important professional contacts for you in the future. So that's something to consider. So we're going to now watch a video. I believe we have enough time. Actually, no, we're going to skip this video, but we can share it in an email with correspondence because we are running low on time, but that's okay. In the video, a career advisor was speaking about feedback. So now this component of the workshop, we're going to discuss the importance of feedback in workplace and group work settings. So take it away, Julie.
Thank you very much, Kendra. And yes, so basically in that video, you will see the employment specialist talk about different things that the newcomers should be aware that related to workplace in Canada. And they also discussed about the importance of feedback in working relationship. And feedback doesn't mean that, you will criticize someone. Feedback could also mean that you are showing appreciation for positive behavior as well. So let's say you already have a history of providing positive feedback to your friend or to your coworker, and then one day you need to provide constructive criticism, or you might want to have a challenging conversation with that person. So having all of that history of previous positive feedback could really help to make it easier for the person to receive and accept that constructive feedback from you. So as you can see here, BET is a model that you can use to communicate appreciation effectively. So you see that there are 3 segments: behavior, affect, and thanks. So for behavior, this is the part when you tell the person that the person is doing something really good, something really helpful. So in this behavior segment, you want to give feedback, describe specific detailed observation of positive behaviors that you observe. We would want to encourage you to use concrete language, to be clear, to be concise, to be detailed, accurate, and you also don't want to exaggerate it because it might make them feel that it's incorrect. And then in the second segment, which is affect, is where you want to show the person how that behavior is benefiting you and other people. So this affect segment will tell you how this person's behavior or action is really helpful for the team. And it will show the positive impact this have on the team to encourage them to continue to do what they are doing. And of course, it cannot finish with the without the last segment, which is to thank them for their behavior. It might seem very obvious. It might seem relatively easy to do this, to thank other people, but you might find that initially a lot of people will feel uncomfortable thanking the other person, or maybe you might feel that maybe I didn't thank them enough, or you may feel that maybe I overthanked that person. So, again, practice makes perfect. So we really want to show our gratitude at the right level so that it reflects the reality and it really show our honesty. So I do find that, the BET model is really helpful in showing appreciation to show people that not only you criticize them at, their worst, but you also appreciating them at their best. And now Kendra will talk more about another model, which, sorry. Yeah, I just want to give an example here for you, how you could use that model during a group project. So let's say for the first segment, for the behavioral part, you can simply say, hey, I noticed that you complete your part by the time that we previously agreed. So then next, you can move to the effect segment. This makes it so much easier for me to get my part done so that we can submit it on time. So let's say, if a group project, it has different phase, right? And one person will have to complete it before another person can begin. So this really shows the positive impact that that person's work have on the group project. And the last segment, to share your thanks, just simply by thank you so much for doing that. You can see that we sometimes provide some model, and you might think that the model could be like so hard, so concrete, but actually when you break it down and do it like this, it could be really easy and really useful for you to maintain and develop a really positive relationship with the people around you, a colleague or a coworker. And now, yes, Kendra, I will pass the mic to Kendra to talk about an even more difficult topic, how to provide constructive criticism.
Thanks, Julie. So sometimes in group work, especially, this comes up often, but in any workplace or group setting, you might need to give critical or constructive feedback. And sometimes it can be tricky, but here is a format that might help you have these more challenging conversations. So first, you would be clear about the behavior. So this is the behavior the individual is or is not exhibiting that is inhibiting the team's success or making it difficult for the team to be successful. Then you would talk about the effect of that behavior having on the effect that behavior is having on the team's process or specifically on you. And then you would give an alternative. So a recommendation of the behavior that the individual could or should do instead of the undesirable or non-productive behavior. And then you would talk about the results. So a description of the positive results that may occur if that individual changes their behavior. And then, the consequence of not changing the behavior. So here's more of an example because it's easier to see it when it's laid out in an example. And this is a common thing in group projects where maybe someone doesn't live up to their commitments in some way. So you could outline the behavior and say, I noticed that you didn't attend our last group meeting, and then describe the effect. This means that we had to do more work to compensate for the work that you were not able to complete at the meeting. And so please make sure you attend future meetings or let us know in advance if a meeting time won't work for you. This way, we all do our part to successfully complete the project. So, this is one way to approach a difficult, challenging situation in group work. You're clear about the behavior, the effect, the alternative, and the result that would be achieved if the person changes their behavior. And this way, it's less likely to be, seen as some sort of personal attack or, cause hard feelings. It's always going to be a bit challenging, but using this particular format can be helpful to help the conversation and the relationship move forward and still say the important things about the behavior that needs to be changed for the group to be successful. So does that make sense to everyone? I hope so. So now we're going to go to questions. And I know that we're short on time, but we're able to stay a few minutes over, to answer any questions that you have and to hear your thoughts. So I did notice in the Q&A, which things should I consider if I want to start a conversation with a stranger in Canada? Julie, did you want to chime in? What do you think people should consider when they're starting a conversation with a stranger?
Yeah, sure. I can share my experience with this. I would say that, I come from a Southeast Asian country. And to be honest, at first, I'm not really comfortable talking to a stranger in Canada. And I see the way people are talking with each other so effortlessly. And sometimes, in the past, I was kind of really wonder, how can they be that open? And, just that's so easy for them to integrate into the conversation like that. So I would think that because in my culture, we don't really build up our skill, our social skill for that kind of interaction. So it really takes time for us to start to get to familiar with that. So practice definitely helps, because just think that, people who living in Canada, they have been in that environment for a really long time, and you coming from a different country as a newcomer, of course, it would be hard for you to adjust. So don't take it hard on yourself. Take your time and practice as often as you can, and having a few friends, having like a good circle where you can feel comfortable talking with is also how, so that you have more confidence talking with a stranger. Another thing that I think you could consider before starting a conversation with a stranger is also to consider their situation as well. So if that person, you see that person are deep in thought, or maybe that person in a hurry to go somewhere else, then maybe that's not the right time for you to start a conversation with them. But if that person is willing to talk, then yeah, just come in and talk with them with confidence, because this is just social interaction. It's not really like your boss or your teacher, your professor or something. It doesn't have any bad effect. It's just that you are making friends. So yeah, just feel open and just come to talk with them. If you feel at first it's hard to find something in common to talk together, then maybe talking about the weather. So in Canada, they have this saying, say, if you don't like the weather, wait for 15 minutes. So meaning the weather here is just changed so much that people like to talk about the weather, because people like to complain together about the weather. That could be something in common. So yeah, feel free to find something in common to talk with each other, to start to initiate the conversation and go from there. And Kendra, I'm sure that you have a lot of different tips for a student about this as well.
Sure. I mean, I think you gave the number one tip is the weather. If you're not sure what to talk about with a stranger, the weather is a go-to. Another thing is like, have you seen any good movies lately or watched any shows lately? And then, just asking a question like that. And then usually people are pretty excited to talk about, a TV show or a movie that they like. Not always, but it can be generally a safe area of conversation. And when I say safe, I mean less likely to be awkward, is what I mean by safe. Yes. So another question I see, and I think we touched on this when we talked about BEAR, behavior effect alternative result, was how to address issues in group activities or assignments when someone does not contribute accordingly. So our first go-to would be using effective communication strategies to give feedback, to make sure the other person understands, and that you all understand what the expectations are, who's responsible for what aspects of the assignment, and to give feedback when people don't follow through on their commitments. One other note on this is that there may be situations where you feel like the first go-to you want to do is involve the authority figure, right? So you may feel tempted to just, when there's an issue, go straight to your faculty. And what you'll often find is the faculty will put it back on you and say, what did you do to resolve this situation? Because that's actually how it works in a lot of workplaces. So if you go to a supervisor in a workplace, often the supervisor will say, okay, what did you do to resolve the situation? Or did you tell the person how you felt about their behavior? So in most situations, the authority figure will put it back on you to work to resolve it. The only situation that might be different is if you literally feel unsafe, like if you feel like you're threatened in some way. In that situation, go straight to someone for help. If you feel threatened, right? So aside from that, try to work with the person directly using effective communication strategies. And then also one other thing too, I would add is if someone in the group is not following through on their commitments, always make sure when you're giving feedback, it's direct to the person as possible, and not to have so many conversations with other group members about that person, like, oh, so-and-so isn't doing their part. Because that's not productive either, right? Dealing with the person directly is considered the ideal response. And I see there's another question. How do we greet our professors? So by first name or sir/madam. I don't think in most situations faculty will expect you to greet them by sir or madam. Another thing to consider is unless a person has identified clearly their gender or preferred pronouns, it's considered a good idea to not assume someone's gender just based on their appearance. So with sir or madam, because those are gendered terms, you could be in a situation where you make an assumption that is not correct. So it's generally good before you use sir or madam to make sure you know whether or not the faculty identifies as male or female, and or what pronouns they use. But generally, the faculty will tell you right away how they prefer to be addressed. And I would say it's very rare that they don't prefer to be addressed by their first name. So as long as the way in which you speak to them is respectful, the way that, calling them by their first name is generally not considered to be disrespectful. Julie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that you actually capture the whole idea of it, to show respect to people, but also be mindful about the gender thing as well. So yeah, that is very important. And I see that in the chat, we actually have another question about not being able to hear the whole conversation. So what should I do if I don't hear a part of the conversation? I learned that I should not ask to repeating several times, but I may miss the content of the conversation. So in this case, what do you think that we should do?
So I've been in these situations, even though like the only language I fluently speak is English, I've been in situations where I didn't quite hear or understand the person and had to ask them to repeat themselves 3 times. And what I would suggest personally is the awkwardness of asking someone to repeat themselves is preferable to the awkwardness of having some sort of misunderstanding later, where you didn't hear that you were supposed to do something or not supposed to do something, and then you end up, not being clear on the instructions, and it results in a negative consequence later. So you may feel like it's inconveniencing someone to ask them to repeat themselves, but it's really generally, for most reasonable people, they understand that having to repeat yourself is a normal part of the conversation. And especially with your faculty, asking them to repeat themselves a few times is generally considered, perfectly within, the expected norms of like communication, because, and it may be like the 3rd time you ask, like you may say, oh, can you repeat that? And then you may have to say like, I still don't understand, can you repeat that? And then it may be really awkward, but even like the 3rd time you didn't understand. And then you can just say, I swear I'm listening, I'm doing my best to understand, but could you please try one more time? So in that situation, the faculty will repeat themselves, or they'll say, hey, we can have a separate conversation later. So I would always suggest asking someone to repeat themselves even 3 times is probably preferable to having some sort of misunderstanding where the person thinks that you weren't listening to them on purpose later, right? Because you weren't following through on something they said you should do or something like that. Julie, thoughts on that?
Yes, so I just want to add a little bit about the whole support Ontario College have. One thing that I really love about Ontario College is that we have a whole system of support, different kind of support for the student. And sometimes I would just feel, very bad if the student cannot take full advantage of all the support they have. So actually, and like at Conestoga, and I believe that it would be the same situation in other Ontario College as well. That you do have the program advisor, and you do have student success advisor as well, who could help you with some, academic aspect of it. So it would be really nice if you feel that you're struggling and you need help, then it would be really nice if you reach out to them for help. And also, if you feel that maybe reaching out to other faculty staff is not very comfortable for you, then you could also reach out to different peer-to-peer support from other students as well. I believe that in the college, they also have that. So, the whole thing might not need to be only in the class environment, but you could also reach out to other people so that, people can help you with that. And the main thing here I want to say is that don't hesitate to get help. Whenever you feel that you are not understanding well from the professor, just ask them because they're willing to help. They are there to help you. And if more than that, you want to get help, then, reach out to further people inside your circle. There are a lot of people there to help you. And Kendra, I actually have another question in the chat that I think that, I should ask you since you have been living here your whole life. Do you think that Canadians usually shake hands? So one student, Iago, I hope that I said the name right, said that in my hometown, it was very popular to shake hands and people should do it smiling and firmly. It shows positive and good energy. How about Canadians?
So that's a very good question. And this is one of the questions that shows how diverse Canada is, because it really kind of depends on the situation and depends on like your social proximity or like how close of a relationship you have with the people in that setting. So in a business setting, traditionally, before the pandemic, shaking hands was considered a standard practice, especially for things like coming to an agreement, or at the end of a job interview. It used to be considered very important to give a firm handshake while, smiling and looking at the person. With the pandemic, that's changed. In almost every situation that I know of, shaking hands is discouraged now, even in situations where it used to be commonplace. So that's something to be aware of. And then just from my own observation, based on like the culture that I'm familiar with, I would say shaking hands with friends when you see them, just, to say hello, is not as common, I think, in Canada as some other places like in the world. So I noticed, like, for example, with Indian students, like saying hello to their friends, they're always shaking hands. And it looks so nice to see people doing that. But typically friends, like at least, from the culture that I'm familiar with, typically they wouldn't shake their hands so much to say hello. So that's, something to be aware of. But Canada is diverse, right? So before the pandemic, I would say not everyone was like that. There were some people who shook hands a lot. It kind of just depended on the situation. But in pandemic Canada right now, shaking hands and I know for sure at Conestoga College, I've seen signage that says, no physical contact. So that's something to be aware of. So I do see a question here. So we aren't going to be able to answer any questions related to immigration or anything like that. So I encourage you to talk to the people who have immigration advising related credentials at your college. So ideas for speaking English well for someone whose language, like mother tongue, is not English. So I, being a monolingual, so only speaking English, have less personal insight into this. But I can say that your college might have, I know that ours does, opportunities to engage informally. So to have informal conversations with people, and they might, for example, our college has normally had something called English conversation circles. So this would be now over Zoom, where people can just practice or ask questions related to informal English and get, experience and practice, communicating in English in kind of a social and informal way. Your college might have something like that. So usually getting practice, like communicating informally, is recommended. Julie, you probably have more personal experience with this. So if there's any insight you would like to share.
Thank you, Kendra. I would say that one of the quickest way for you to improve English would be to immerse yourself inside the English environment. So it could be through the English cafe, like Kendra just shared, which is really good. And also, you can also try to improve your English with the people with the same interest as well. For example, in your college, there must be, I imagine that there must be a lot of different kind of clubs, and find one club that you have interest in that and integrate with those people, because for people with a common interest, it would be easier for you to talk, and it would be easier for you to build a network of people that you know, and gradually build up your confidence and your English proficiency as well. I think that we have time for one more question. Kendra, do you think so? I see that there are two questions in
do you want to pick one, Julie? Yeah.
So this question more, I think that for this question is more like classroom etiquette. So if I want to break during online class, should I interrupt my professor? Like, for example, if I have some network failure or, for washroom, what should I do? Should I notify the professor?
That's a good question. I would say that the easiest response I can say is that sometimes at the beginning of your course, the faculty will actually kind of set expectations and tell you what's expected for breaks. Now, and for in-person classes, it's usually straightforward. If you need to visit the washroom, the faculty will usually, if it's a 3-hour class or a longer class, the faculty will usually actually give everyone a break for a few minutes at least at a set time during the course of the class to avoid interruptions along the way. So usually for a 3-hour class, they would have at least a 15-minute break in the middle based on my experience and what I've heard from students. If it's online, then I would suggest, it depends on the situation, right? And especially it depends if it's synchronous or asynchronous. If you're expected to, have your camera on and be on screen, that might be different. So I would say for online classes, it's better to ask the faculty in the beginning or review all of the course outlines or materials that they give to you, where they would probably set expectations and explain some etiquette, because I think a lot of faculty do address these concerns at the beginning of class. So I would suggest make sure you're familiar with your faculty and what their preferences are for online learning. It can depend a lot on the format and how things are delivered. And also if you have like live assignments or activities to be doing. So for in-class, try to take your break when the faculty schedules a break. And then online, just check with your faculty. And then should I ask my doubts to my professor after the class or in between? So the rule here is generally it's better to ask a personal question. So if something's just related to you, like for example, oh, I don't understand why I got this mark on this assignment or something like that. Or you would want to make sure that's a private conversation with your faculty, either via email, or you can ask them after class, do you have time to speak right now? And then if they say yes, they have time to have a conversation, then you would ask them. So generally, you don't want to interrupt a class to ask a question that's just related to you and a personal concern you had related to your grade on assignment or something like that, or an absence that you anticipate you'll need to have for whatever reason. If the question relates exactly to what the faculty is talking about in that moment, you could always raise your hand and see if the faculty takes your question. If the faculty, there's nothing wrong with raising your hand. If the faculty sees your hand up, but they want to just get through the content first before questions, they'll let you know. So usually there's nothing wrong with raising your hand, and then your faculty will indicate if they can take your question, if it's related to the topic the faculty is discussing at that time. But if it's personal just to you, I would say wait till the end or do it via email. And if you're, it's the end of the class, try not to assume the faculty is going to have time to speak with you, and ask them first, do you have time? Because they may have 5 minutes to get to another class on the other side of campus. So that's something to be aware of. Julie, anything to add to that?
I think that you explained it perfectly. to be honest with you. I see that there's one comment from Mutiat about your question. So actually, Mutiat, your question is about student visa, which we are not experts on. I would suggest that you go to the person who in charge of immigration related inquiries at your college to get your help with that. So normally, the person's title would be international student advisor. So try to see if there's any international student advisor at your college to help you with this. And if not, then you can ask some people in the not faculty, but in the how do you say, like in the student service department to help you, to guide you, direct you to the right person. So because this question is very related to immigration, we wouldn't want to provide you with inaccurate information. So yeah, feel free to go to the right person. Yeah. And Kendra, I think that it's quite late now. Thank you so much for being with
we
us
went
this
20
week.
minutes over. So I'd like to thank you all for participating. Julie, thanks for staying late with me to address the questions. We really appreciate that. And you should be sent a recorded version of this webinar as well automatically. And thanks again for participating. And one more thing about that question related to immigration, I would say contact your international office at your campus, so they will know the right person. So because we don't know which college you're with. So make sure you just contact the international office at your campus, and they are probably on a break until January 3rd, and they'll get back to you after January 3rd, most likely. All right, so again, thanks everyone for participating, and good luck in your studies, and have a happy new year.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.